Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody. Welcome. Before we get into the main part of the lecture, I would just like to ask everybody to make dua for me. I'm going to be sitting for an exam on Tuesday the 23rd of October. It's a 4-hour exam. And all I've been doing, besides what I've got to do, is studying. So this week coming up, I'll be lecturing on Jerusalem in the Qur'an and Islam here at Rollins, and Dr. Judith Greenberg. She's a Fulbright professor, has written, I think, 3 books, and I'll be lecturing in her class on Wednesday. Thursday, I have a court appearance, and then I go to Gainesville, where I'll be doing a fast-a-thon at the University of Florida, Gainesville, Stephen O'Connell Center, I think it's called. And then Friday I'll be here for Juma. Saturday I have a wedding, and Sunday the class, and the exam is Tuesday. So there's a lot going on, and I just ask all of you to make dua for me that Allah will help my brain to be at its best. Yes, okay. I want to welcome all of you here, and Nijma, I'm so happy to have you here today. I was hoping that Leigh's grandmother would be here too. I'm going to ask you to do something that I don't normally ask you to do today before we get started. I actually would like you to look at the slides that I'm going to go over today, and the ones that you don't think are important, I want you to number them. So this is something I actively want you to be critical. What I've done is I did too much research, which is often what I do, and then I'm only going to be given half the time I was told I was given, so I've got to chisel away. So if you think, no, that really wasn't that valid, it's okay to say that. And there's 47 of them, and obviously I don't think there's any critique on the first one. But if you would give me your feedback, I would appreciate it. And I know that Nijma is very familiar with Jerusalem, so that's what we're going to be doing today. I really there's a part of my heart that is sad that we're not looking at one of the asma wa sifat of Allah today, because this subject matter is very stirring for me spiritually. But this is something several people had said, is this open to the public? And I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll present my research to the class. So, and alhamdulillah ta'ala, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده رسوله. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Him. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our soul and from our sinful deeds. Those who are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one can misguide them. Those who are not guided by Allah, there is no guide for them. I bear witness that there's no God, there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His servant and messenger. O you who believe, revere Allah as He should be revered, and die not except as Muslims. Amma ba'd. So just to help you better understand what we're doing here, this professor is a professor of religious studies and happens to be an Israeli professor. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. So the holy city sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Jerusalem, Beit al-Maqdis, house of the holy, is not mentioned specifically by name in the Qur'an. Islam is deeply rooted in Judaism and Christianity. Many stories with biblical backgrounds are undoubtedly situated in Jerusalem, and some of the stories have been included in the Qur'an. And of course, this is a picture. You can also critique those as well. The designation Beit al-Maqdis, literally the house of the holy, from Hebrew Beit ha-Mikdash, the temple, has 3 meanings. First, the Jewish temple and its successor, the Temple Mount, or Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, and the Dome of the Rock, and the Aqsa Masjid. Second, the city of Jerusalem. And third, the Holy Land, al-Ard al-Maqaddasa. And of course, here you recognize Ard is the word for earth in Arabic. Based on relevant passages in the Qur'an, Muslim tradition created an image of Jerusalem that combines Jerusalem and Christian elements with specifically Islamic ones. The main sources to be consulted in presenting this image are the vast corpus of Quranic and commentaries, tafsir, exegesis of Qur'an, classical and medieval, exegesis of the Qur'an, early, modern, and contemporary, and the Fada'il al-Quds, the virtues of Jerusalem literature. And so there's actually like a library of this Fada'il al-Quds, which is the virtues of Jerusalem that have been written about. There are so many books written on the subject. By its very nature, the literary genre of Fada'il al-Quds, the virtues of Jerusalem, is an expression of local pride, which explains why the authors active in this field find more material in the Quran in favor of Jerusalem than did the Quranic commentators, Mufassirun. From the book Islamic Sites in Philistine, Raif Najm, the stream of the word Quds, as mentioned in the authoritative Arab dictionary, Lisanul Arab, the Arab tongue, under the stem Quds means glorification of Allah. He is al-Muttaqaddis, the one attaining sanctity, al-Qudus, the most glorified, and al-Muqaddas, the sanctified. So interestingly enough, when we are studying a city, we are actually seeing the names of Allah as we are studying this. I found that very interesting. In the Quran, angels address Allah saying, "While we glorify thee and sanctify thee." Consequently, the word al-Quds, city, means linguistically the purified township elevated over defects and shortcomings. So even in the very name of Jerusalem, and I always think about it, Jerusalem, the city of peace, like that. So that's how I've always really thought about it. Al-Quds is an inseparable part of the Islamic faith. In the opening of the Surah Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Glory to Allah who did take the servant for a journey by night from the sacred masjid of Mecca to the Father's masjid, whose precincts we did bless, in order that we might show him some of our signs. For Allah is the one who hears and sees all things." Oh, she is just fine. No, she's just fine. Precincts refer to the blessed land of Jerusalem, Palestine, and some scholars say Syria as well. Bayt al-Maqdis, the house of sanctity, was built by apostles, and by them worship was started there. There is not the smallest plot on which no prophet or angel stood for prayers. With these words did Ibn al-Faqih of the 3rd century after Hijrah sum up the Islamic view to the first of two Qiblas, the direction to which Muslims have and now turn at prayer, and the third of the three greatest Muslim masajid. To the Aqsa Masjid was the nocturnal journey of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, al-Isra, and from al-Quds started his ascension to heavens. The Prophet's traditions include great encouragement for Muslims to visit the Aqsa Masjid. In praise of the sanctity of the Father's Masjid, al-Aqsa, there are so many great pieces of literature. To Aqsa came caliphs, beginning with the second caliph, Caliph Umar al-Faruq. Then followed successions of caliphs, kings, learned men, and women and worshippers, all seeking the blessings of the holy place. Do not be embarrassed or shy. We were all there one time, and sometimes we act like that now. We just don't want people to know. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Do not travel specifically to any mosque," and I usually use the word masjid because there's really no way to spell mosque in Arabic, except three: al-Masjid al-Haram, Masjid al-Aqsa, and this. One prayer in al-Masjid al-Aqsa is equivalent to 250. Have we not established for them a secure sanctuary? So here Often you've heard me teach that different times of the day have superiority, different days of the week have superiority, different months in Islam have superiority, and here's a situation where we have different places. So just to be able to pray in that masjid, you're going to get 250 times more blessing than if you were just praying somewhere else. If we pray in Jama'ah rather than praying on our own, how many more blessings do we get? 27. Very good. Alhamdulillah. Muslims have maintained their religious inheritance at Al-Quds. Their princes and rulers competed in building monuments and architectural signs of their devotion to the holy city, the city of Salam. From the glorious ages of Islam, there stand in Al-Quds schools, masajid, charitable buildings, so many waqf, an Islamic endowment or property to be held in trust and used for charitable or religious purposes, houses and shops where the income goes to charitable needs in the community of Jerusalem. And interestingly enough, I have to do some digging into this because as I whittle this down, I will be talking about this new administration's decision to make Jerusalem what they did. In this way, the city becomes a vast collection of magnificent buildings bearing signs of a most advanced civilization. In many respects, it could be said that the city indeed represents a capital of Islamic civilization. Quranic commentators claimed exclusiveness for Jerusalem in passages for which the Mufassirun, the authors of Tafsir, offered a variety of interpretations. And the architectural renderings in Jerusalem are unbelievable. I pray to get to experience this personally one day, but from the most modern of architecture to the most ancient of architecture, it's unbelievable. And this is, of course, the second temple of Jerusalem. And as you can see, talk about modern structures. This is the National Library of Jerusalem. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Lion's Gate. And by the way, just as a piece of trivia information, the dome that is seen on most masjids came from what? Came from where? Came from Orthodox Christians. It has nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. It has become something to do with Islam, but it actually was adopted from the Christians. So people build masjids and they spend thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands in some cases, just to have a dome, and then they call it Islamic. It is not Islamic. It's got nothing to do with Islam. I have, but alhamdulillah. So just so you have that knowledge, you know that, yes, this is commonly seen in Arab architecture, but it was actually borrowed or taken from another culture.
And sometimes they make moon and a star too.
Yes, which is also
color, nothing at all.
Yeah. There are a number of instances in which there is general agreement in both commentary, tafsir, and fada'il, literature regarding the virtues of Jerusalem, that certain Quranic passages allude to Jerusalem rather than other places. This applies, for instance, to the identification of the Father's Masjid, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, in chapter 17 of the Quran, verse 1, with Al-Haram Al-Sharif in Jerusalem, which is said to have been the destination of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's night journey, Isra, and the scene of his ascension, Mi'raj. Can I have some water, please? And here is some other pictures of the Haram Al-Sharif, which is amazing, and then the Al-Aqsa Masjid complex. So I just sort of give you a full view of things. In that verse, exalted is he who took his servant by night from Al-Masjid Al-Haram to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, whose surroundings we have blessed to show him of our signs. Indeed, he is the hearing, the seeing. It is the site of the Jewish temple, which was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 CE, and reconstructed by the Muslims during the Caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab. And I put in the dates of Umar ibn al-Khattab there just so that people can see the dates. If you have comments or you can share or elaborate, if you've been to Jerusalem, please do. There is disagreement as to whether Muhammad ﷺ prayed in the sanctuary. Had he done so, it might have been incumbent on Muslims also to visit Jerusalem when on the pilgrimage, Hajj, to Mecca. Therefore, some theologians denied the idea of Muhammad ﷺ praying in the sanctuary. It has been accepted that the direction of prayer was Jerusalem before it was changed to the Kaaba in Mecca. According to others, however, confirmation of the belief in one God, Tawheed, was revealed in Jerusalem when Muhammad ﷺ prayed with the prophets, his predecessors in office, in the sanctuary. So this is where we see some differences of opinions of scholars here, because some say he led all of the prophets in the heavens, and so there is this element of scholarship that says that this is where this happened. Allah knows best. General agreement likewise exists regarding the interpretation of the second chapter of the Holy Qur'an, verses 142 to 150, where the change of the direction of prayer is discussed.
There's a mosque in Mecca called Masjid Qiblatin.
Yeah.
And this is when the Prophet Muhammad got the order to change. He actually turned 180 degrees.
Yes, mashallah.
And pointed to Mecca.
Wow. I'd have to remember to look, see if I can get an image of that. Qiblatin. Because I don't think I remember that. Thank you. Okay. So let's look at the verse. The foolish among the people will say, what has turned them away from their Qibla, which they used to face? Say, to Allah belongs the east and the west. He guides whom he wills to a straight path. And thus we have made you a just community, that you will be witnesses over the people, and the messenger will be a witness over you. And we did not make the Qibla which you used to face, except that we might make evident who would follow the messenger and who would turn back on his heels. And indeed it is difficult except for those whom Allah has guided, and never would Allah have caused you to lose your faith. Indeed, Allah is to the people kind and merciful. And before we go on with this verse, what are we seeing here? The human element of struggle with change. If I say to any of you right now, excuse me, but would you get up out of that seat and move over here? There will be some discomfort associated with that. Like, I'm comfortable here. I have all my stuff here. Why you picking on me? Why have I got to move? Same way, change is difficult. So only by faith, and there's a deep message in this, only by faith, strong a man, will we adjust to change easily. Without faith, we will always struggle with fate. Without faith, we will always struggle with what comes up in our life. We will question God. We will blame ourselves. We will be angry with ourselves. We'll be angry with other people. But when our man is strong, we'll say, everything is from Allah, the kind and merciful one. We have certainly seen the turning of your face, O Muhammad, toward the heaven, and we will surely turn you to a Qibla with which you will be pleased. And there's something else very beautiful in this, and I'm having two thoughts at one time. How the beloved Prophet had migrated, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and imagine what it must have been like for him when Allah said, this is a way that you can return home, that you can face your home. Even though it was a spiritual thing, but imagine that he was homesick from Mecca and had traveled to Medina at the commands of God. It's like a special gift. It's like a very special favor from Allah in some way. So turn your face toward Al-Masjid Al-Haram, and wherever you believers are, turn your faces toward it in prayer. Indeed, those who have been given the scripture well known that it is the truth from their Lord, and Allah is not unaware of what you do. And there's something very beautiful about this, because it's reminding us that the people of the book were told about this. So there's so much in this verse. It really is beautiful. I love this. And if you brought to those who were given the scripture every sign, they would not follow your Qibla. Nor will you be a follower of their Qibla. Nor would they be followers of one another's Qibla. So if you were to follow their desires after what has come to you of knowledge, indeed you would then be among the wrongdoers. As-salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're welcome to come here and just pull those seats back if you want to, if that'll make you comfortable. The setting of many biblical stories incorporated in the Qur'an is Jerusalem or the Holy Land, although the name is not explicitly mentioned. Jews and Christian traditions, both apocryphal, and that means sections from the Bible that are not sanctioned as belonging to certain official canons. So what does that really mean? It means that basically when the Catholic Church made a canonization and decided what would be the Bible, then that's what they called it. And that's what people assume it is, because that's what we've been brainwashed to believe. Which we know that there are many books that were theopanoupes, God-breathed in the Hebrew, that are in secret places in the Vatican, which no one has access to. But this is a known fact. The Dead Sea Scrolls, other things that have been discovered in our era have actually pointed to these stories that don't show up in the so-called canonization, but have shown up in books that were not included that we happen to have access to. And of course, the Chronicles are the ones that have been accepted as genuine. And who determined that? The King James, apparently. And King James was a very interesting person. I would invite you to do research about King James. It's humorous, it's entertaining.
There's a Bible, a King James Bible, right?
Uh-huh. Such as those about the location of the Last Judgment in Jerusalem have been adopted by Muslims. So we're going to see here as we're moving through that we believe in the return of Christ, and in the ahadith concerning this, we actually know that the I.S.L.A.M will return somewhere in the Tel Aviv area. This is what we know based on authentic ahadith. So in chapter 50, verse 41, and listen for the day when the caller will call out from a place quite near, min makanin kariban, is said to refer to Jerusalem, the place quite near, being the holy rock, al-Sakhira, in the al-Haram al-Sharif. And what we know from the Quran and the ahadith is that the angel Israfil, standing on the holy rock, will call the dead to rise from their graves. So there's some very interesting pieces of knowledge surrounding this. It is a place appropriate for the purpose because it is next to heaven. I'm not sure what the scholars really mean by that, but this is something that I picked up from one of the classic readings that the scholars had this.
Is it Sakhira or Sakhira?
Sakhra. Yeah. Did I say Sakhira? Okay. Okay. There is, on the other hand, an interpretation offered by al-Zamakhshari, who is a medieval Muslim scholar of Persian origin, and this is his lifetime, according to which a place quite near means the feet of the dead or the root of the hair. This is something I had never seen in my studies, and I just happened to pick this up, and so it's out there. It is scholarly writing. So many other indications of places are not as those just mentioned unequivocally. There are numerous cases. The generally accepted exegetical tendency to amass traditional interpretations. One or more sites in addition to Jerusalem have been proposed. In other words, these places compete with Jerusalem. So if you are a Christian and you were to go on a Holy Land tour, chances are you would get a story based on modern day Christian understanding. And it's important that we add that modern day piece there. Okay? If you were to have a Jewish guide, you would get a different story. If you were to have a Muslim guide, you would probably get a more balanced story anyway. But you would get a different story. Very beautiful. Rarely will I ever recommend anybody to go searching stuff on a computer, but there is a wonderful YouTube video of Jewish students who were on a tour of the Holy Land, and the bus driver or the tour guide was giving the lesson incorrectly, and these students got off the bus, refused to listen to, these were Jewish students, refused to listen to it. They protested it, and they got their money back, didn't they?
Yes.
They even got their money back for the trip. So this is amazing. I thought,
Send it to the group.
please do, May, soon. Yeah, I think it would touch your heart to see how youth are so proactive in this stance for justice, and God knows in the current situation we need to be. And so I shout out to the youth in the room my praises, because you guys have the key. You really do. Yeah. On a higher level of competing, is that between Jerusalem and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, or between the Holy Land and the rest of the world? So you see this sort of competition for holy lands, holy places, pilgrimages. So a Christian would go to the Holy Land and say they did their pilgrimage. A Muslim will go to Mecca. So we have this sort of projected competition over space. The latter is present in the interpretation of chapter 7, verse 137, and we made of a people considered weak, inheritors of the land in both east and west, land whereupon we sent down our blessings. So here we see something really beautiful. We see that this is a land that is a sacred land on some level, that Allah actually blessed this land. Now what we know is that there are some scientific experiments that have been done, and they have tried to figure out what's so special about Mecca. But they have alluded to the fact that it is actually the center of the universe. We already know that stuff because we know that's where Adam and Hawa met, and we know all of this history, but the rest of the world is just catching up to us, and minutely, actually. The blessed land is Syria, or according to another interpretation, the whole world, because God conferred the kingdom of the world upon David and Solomon. And I think this is so amazing, because when we talk about in Allah's magnificence how that He made places special, and there are more blessings in praying in certain masajid, then He made lands blessed, but then He made the whole earth a masjid. So no matter where you are, it's blessed. Just some of it is more blessed than the other blessed, but it's all blessed. In Surah 21, verse 105, before this we wrote in the Psalms, Al-Zabur, after the message, Al-Dhikr, my servants, the righteous, shall inherit the earth. And according to Speyer, the only word-for-word citation of the Bible, we find a similar story in Matthew 5:5 and in Psalms 37:19. Although it undoubtedly refers to the Holy Land, other interpretations have been offered. Some say it means paradise, which is to be granted to the believers, but also this world, the universal kingdom of Islam. The inheritance will come at the end of time, when I.S.L.A.M descends from heaven to fight the unbelievers, subjecting the whole world to Islamic rule. And this is exactly what the war on Islam is. It's not a war on terror. It's a war on Islam, because we are going to continue to have big families. Other people are not going to have families, and then we're just going to keep growing. And just like you're seeing in history, you're seeing countries that are now predominantly Muslim, like Germany. You're seeing a number of countries. And that's what they're afraid of. The decisive battle will be fought in Jerusalem. More often, Jerusalem competes with Mecca, as both are cities, and the Holy Land with the Hijaz, which is a region in Saudi Arabia bordering on the Red Sea, formerly an independent kingdom containing the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina. So here again you can see all of the accolades of these places, spiritual blessings, and it's mentioned in the Qur'an, just not specifically by name. In Surah 17, verse 60, we granted the vision which we showed you has been explained in two ways. It is the vision Muhammad ﷺ had after his return from the night journey. When the Quraysh called him a liar, the Prophet had a vision of Bayt al-Maqdis, which enabled him to answer questions that the Meccans were asking in order to examine the veracity of his story. And this story, I could have done actually a whole class just on this story. It is so beautiful because the people were really ridiculing the messenger of God. Like, you're so stupid. Don't you think we're stupid? You think you're going to convince us that you went here and you went there all up in such a quick time. So the people actually went and felt his bed, and his bed was still warm. This is how fast all of this took place in the spiritual realm.
Every year.
And let me just finish this. And when the Quraysh were asking him questions, he could have only answered them because Allah transported him there. But they asked him specific questions, and he was able to answer because of that. Fazia, and then...
I was just saying every year because sometime on YouTube you are finding some specific video and you cannot find it again. So that video which I give it to my student every year on the time of when it's coming Miraj, Christmas and Miraj, that is a beautiful video and I will send you that.
Okay.
It's covering, it's not adding unnecessary stuff which has never happened, and it's so to the point. And it's not like a Yasir Qadi, he's giving 2.5 hour lecture. And no one has that much time to sit down and listen. So I'll send you that.
Inshallah. Brother.
On his way back, he told them that these caravans are coming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like he's flying over them.
Yeah.
And that's how he proved that he did make the journey.
And of course, there's so much to add to this, because imagine the messenger of God, ﷺ, encountering all of the prophets, 125,000, and leading them in prayer. Imagine that. Carrying the prayers of all the ones that went before him. Powerful stuff. And then imagine his coming back and running into Musa a.s., telling Musa, Allah has ordered that our people will pray 50 times a day, rejoicing in this. And he's saying, hey dude, been there, done that, it's not going to happen. You need to go back and do some bargaining. So just imagine that the messenger of God could go in that divine presence that's never been seen by a human and talk to Allah. Another interpretation is that Muhammad ﷺ had a vision of the forthcoming conquest of Mecca at Al-Hudaybiyah, when the Quraysh prevented him from entering Mecca to offer sacrifices at the Kaaba. And it should be Kaaba. In Surah 2, verse 114, and who is more unjust than he who forbids that in places for the worship of God, God's name should be celebrated? The seal is to ruin them. Possibly refers to the destruction of the temple either by Nebuchadnezzar or Titus. So just another little piece of exegetical information about this verse. It has been interpreted, however, as referring to Mecca and the Kaaba. When the heathens, I would think I'll change this to Quraysh, before Muhammad ﷺ's immigration, prevented him from worshiping at the Kaaba. Another interpretation says that this happened at the Battle of Al-Hudaybiyah. as we all know, that after this happened, there was an oath made to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and is often known as the oath of the tree. And so here's what some commentators have said about this. The olive tree mentioned in Surah 95 verse 1, at which an oath was sworn, has been explained both as meaning what it is, a valuable plant, and as denoting the hill on which Bayt al-Maqdis stands. So with everything in Islam, there are layers. And you can read a verse in the Qur'an, and 30 years later, after you are a Muslim, you will have seen 3 or 4 different things in the same verse over a period of time. The rivalry between Jerusalem and Mecca is also apparent in the question whether it was Isaac or Ishmael whom Abraham was ordered to slaughter as a sacrifice. The story is recounted in the 37th chapter of the Holy Qur'an, verses 99 through 111, but the narrative leaves open the identity of the potential victim. If it was Isaac, Jerusalem would be the place of the sacrifice. Otherwise, it would be Mecca or nearby Mina. And so obviously this is just scholarly sort of ijma' here, consensus and interpretation. Conversely, the account of the building of the Kaaba in chapter 2 of the Holy Quran, verse 125, is in favor of Ishmael, for he assisted his father, thus proving his presence in Mecca. I'm not quite sure why any scholar would find an argument with this, because it's very clear, at least in the translation of the Holy Bible, but what it does is it refers to Hajar as a concubine. And we know by Judaic law that she was his wife, couldn't have been concubine. So it's very even clear, even though they say Isaac in the King James or in the Holy Bible, it doesn't make sense, because it clearly states that Sarah was without child, that she couldn't have child, and that this second wife came along and she said, "You get out of here and take her with you." It's actually pretty clear. Another example.
To the previous slide, please. I just wanted to take a picture.
Okay. Another example of Jerusalem's rivalry with Mecca may be found with the interpretation of the parable of the divine light in Surah 24, verses 35 through 36. And I.S.L.A.M, I actually think there may be another interpretation to this, but Allah knows best. It could be an allusion to candles lit in churches and monasteries, but another interpretation exists. The houses, Bayut, mentioned in Surah 24, verse 36, in which the light is lit, are 4 structures, all erected by prophets. Peace and blessings be upon all of them. The 4 are the Kaaba, built by Abraham and Ismail, Bayt al-Maqdis, built by Dawood and Sulaiman, Masjid al-Madinah and Masjid Quba, both built by Muhammad ﷺ. Each can be deemed to be a masjid founded on piety, Surah 9, verse 108. So here we see this amazing references, and Allah knows best, but perhaps even that light refers to the Nur of Allah. Allahu Alam. But clearly we have all of these scholarly explanations to this place. So here we see that Jerusalem is put on par with the holy places in the Hijaz, which again, Jerusalem has a central piece in the heart of a Muslim. It's as if we are connected by our spiritual umbilical cords. Al-Razi, the Persian polymath, physician, alchemist, and philosopher, and I put his timing here, from his Tafsir, volume 24, 3, and the Quran, chapter 24, verse 36, cites another interpretation in the names of Al-Hasan al-Basri, I have his time here, who identifies the houses without explaining the plural with Bayt al-Maqdis because it is illuminated with 10,000 camels. So here you have all of these things. that are so beautiful, and all have to do with what? Light. So if you take all of these interpretations and look at them, what is the underlying message? That we should always be turning to places of light. Jerusalem competes not only with Mecca but also with other worlds. In Qur'an 79 verse 14 is said to be the surface of the earth to which the dead will ascend on the day of resurrection. So, Sahira, right? Yeah. Sahira, right? It's a long A, right? Yes. Okay. Some commentators define it geographically as the plain to the north of Jerusalem on which humankind will gather during the day of judgment. According to others, it is a plain destined for the gathering of the unbelievers, causing such fright as to prevent people from slumbering. So this comes from out of Ahadith, which talking about when Isa.A.M. comes back. But what are we told to do? And this is amazing. While other people will be afraid when Isa returns, we are told if you have a sapling in your hand, plant it. Chill out. It's GPS. God's planning system is at work here. So just chill out. Plant your tree and wait and see what God's got next for you. But there's this sense of peace and surrender here. It's remarkable. Another exegetical tradition explains as the new earth, I didn't, which will replace this earth when the world comes to an end, and finally, according to yet another understanding, they say it is hell. So these are all things that you'll find if you're studying scholarly writings. Allah knows best. When you are sharing this information in an academic institution, you must acknowledge whatever scholarly information is out there.
So what are they saying is hell here?
Some scholars say that verse is actually referring to hell.
The creation of the new world.
Yes.
And people will stay here on the old world who are the believers? Allah
knows best. Yes. Yeah. If I could answer it, I would, but I'm not sure I won't. Okay. Also understood to have both eschatological, and this worldly connotation is the wall mentioned in chapter 57, verse 13. A wall will be put up between them with the gate therein. Within it will be mercy, and without it, all alongside will be punished. The wall is understood to be the eastern wall of the Al-Haram al-Sharif above Wadi Jahannam, the Kidron Valley. The gate is Bab al-Rahman. Bab means door or gate. The gate of mercy, one of the two entrances of the Golden Gate. So if you remember one of the pictures back in the beginning, I showed you the gates. Does everybody remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that is what this is referring to. According to some commentators, though, it is the partition between paradise and hell, a kind of purgatory, the gate where the elect will enter paradise, called Barzakh. On the day of resurrection, those raised from the dead will rush to a goal post called Nasub, mentioned in chapter 70, verse 43. This is understood by some to be the holy rock in Jerusalem, but by others to be a signpost, I.S.L.A.M. So what do we know by that? I.S.L.A.M means one who has knowledge. Ilm is knowledge. And so here we see ayat means sign. We have ayat in the Qur'an. So when you see this sign, this sort of root, this stem, it has something to do with signs for you. To which the believers, or an idol to which the polytheists will rush on the day of judgment. So here is another scholarly piece of information that's out there. Rivalry exists on the local level between Jerusalem and other towns of Palestine and Syria. The town Al-Qarya, mentioned in chapter 2, verse 58, whose gates the Israelites were ordered to enter with humility, is identified in the exegetical literature as Jerusalem or Jericho. When Jericho is mentioned, the remark is added that it is located not far from Jerusalem. But according to some commentators, it is the gate of Cairo or Egypt. So here you see people take the stuff, and there's all kinds of stuff out there. But what am I trying to point out to this class? The commonalities and the fact that Jerusalem has such a strong place in the hearts of Muslims.
And even then, I mean, as when it says enter the place in humility, I take it as entering heaven's gates. Remember how you said earlier there's different levels to the verses? I believe that's one of the levels of understanding.
Alhamdulillah. Yes, please.
I wouldn't look at it as competition between places. We put that in our heads.
Yeah,
All this is Allah's
Yes.
blessing, His creation, and He's blessed many places.
Yes.
Mecca,
I agree with you, 100%.
Jerusalem, the Mount Sinai, many places have been blessed, and it's not fair to compare them. You know, this one's better than that one.
Yeah. Well, I said they're all blessed, and that's what I'm trying to convey here. I'm not trying to convey that there's like literal competition, but if you listen to what people project, people will talk about it from a nationalistic standpoint. What I want to demonstrate is what the Qur'an, how the Qur'an alludes to this place as a place of light. So the Christians were there, it was a place of light. The Jews were there, are there, it's a place of light. So this, it's not my intention at all to present it as competition. Is that what it sounds like? Okay, thank you. I'll have to look at that.
Maybe it's not your point of view, but this one wants to say this place is more important than that one. This religion, this place is more important than that one. And
Okay.
this all has to be viewed in
Yes.
it's Allah's creation, and we don't know.
Mm.
And He has a purpose for all of it.
Exactly. Yeah. The only way that I would give any place superior is if Allah said I get more blessings for praying there than I do somewhere else. That's the only way. If a verse in the Quran gives it superiority, that's the only way, but not in terms of anything else. Okay, so if I conveyed that, please forgive me. That wasn't my intention. Yes.
So I'm just saying people have rights to interpret whatever they think about, but the Quran is saying, and Allah is saying in the Quran, there's some ayah that are mutashabihat, and you should not too much argue with that. And Allah knows
Right.
what it's all about. So what we need from Quran is just the basic information how to do right and stay from the wrong.
Yeah. And as I said to you before, this is a class that's going to be presented to college students that are learning about the influence of Jerusalem and how it's mentioned and seen among Muslim scholars. So it is quite different from a class that you normally hear me teach. It's very different to hear me come across like this, I'm sure. So I would like to have feedback on it. If you tell me the slides that you thought are total a waste of time, and that's what I asked you in the front of the class. This is different. It's a wholly different format than you usually see me teach.
Where you had mentioned about the pictures, if you remember, I would add a slide of them.
Again? Okay. I thank you for your feedback. The professor told me, I can't, anyway, the professor sent me a very explicit, after I sent her my presentation, she sent me a very explicit email on what she expected, how many slides, and limited the pictures. So that's what happens in academia. So it's part of the wonderful intellectual challenge of learning and the fun of learning and working with colleagues. Dr. Idris is a professor, so he knows how that works. Sometimes we don't get to teach what we want to teach. We have to address what we're being asked to teach. Somebody raised their hand. Oh, I'm sorry, Fazia.
I'm saying there's one place in Quran Allah is saying about the Isaac, peace be upon him.
Right.
Okay, angel came to the Prophet Ibrahim to give the glad tidings, and at the same time they were going to the nation of Lut, peace be upon him, to destroy them. And at that point, Ibrahim A.S.L.A.M is saying, I'm so old.
Yes.
So he was just amazed at how my wife will get, and she started laughing at how I can get
Yes.
pregnant. That's been, obviously they were so old, they were not capable of that. That's why they were amazed. And that's mean that I.S.L.A.M was born first.
Yes, we have no doubts, and I think even from a biblical, I've talked to biblical scholars that absolutely know that Ishmael was born first. Because Sarah couldn't have children. She was 80 when God gave her a child. So let's see if I can finish this, inshallah. Another example, the one who passed by town, all in ruins to its roofs, in chapter 2, verse 259, was either Ezra, Jeremiah. And by the way, in terms of the canonization of the Bible, the first books are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 1 King, Ezra, Nehemiah, Job, Psalms, Proverbs. So you just heard me say those two names. Here they are mentioned, and they are books in the canonized Bible. That took a lot. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 King, Ezra, Nehemiah, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon's, and I'm not sure what the next one is. I wish that I could do the chapters of the Qur'an like I could do that, inshallah, one day, and do it correctly. There are three proposals about the name of the town. First, Sabur on the Tigris, situated between Wasit and Al-Mada'in. Second, Jerusalem. And third, the town of those who abandoned their homes, though they were thousands for fear of death, mentioned in Surah 2, verse 243. So again, we know that this area is where? Jerusalem, somewhere in that area. There are various explanations of the Holy Land, al-Ard al-Muqaddasa. In Surah 5, verse 21, it is said to be Jericho, Jordan, and Palestine, or Tur, Mount Sinai, and its surroundings. According to others, it is Al-Sham, Syria, or Damascus, or simply Jericho. Equally various are the locations given for the Rabwa, literally great or high place, in the Qur'an in chapter 23, verse 50, where Mary, the mother of Jesus, found shelter with her son, the plain of Damascus, Jerusalem, Ramla, or Egypt, the latter apparently a reminiscent of the flight of Joseph, Mary, and Jesus to Egypt, as mentioned in the Gospels. Now, let me throw something out here to you that I won't be able to throw out in that class, because it would be controversial. What do you know about the Gospels that I just named? The Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are 4 books in the canonization Bible. However, they were not theopanopius. They were not God-breathed. They were not inspired by God and revealed to an angel and then to a prophet. They were the diaries of men who recorded their experience, and there are experiences in all the books that are supposed to be talking about the same person, but actually are contradictory stories. So it's okay. So we know that the Injil is the Word of God, and that in the form that it was revealed, there is no error. There are no mistakes in it. We know that the Torah is the revealed Word of God, and there are no mistakes in it. Anytime we translate, there will be problem with translation, just as we have many translation problems in the translations of the Holy Qur'an. There is simply Arabic terminology that cannot be translated into an English understanding. Does that make sense? For example, if I say sujood to an English-speaking person, they will not know what I'm talking about. If I say awra and I tell them it means nakedness, they will not understand the context of nakedness among Muslims, because it's very different than the Western world. So again, what are we looking at throughout this presentation is the commonality. We're not here to criticize anybody else. We're looking at the commonality of Jerusalem among Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The close relationship between Jerusalem and the Qur'an found expression in the enumeration of merit earned by those who recite certain surahs, certain chapters of the Qur'an. The person who recites chapter 29, Al-Ankabut, the Spatter, will receive for each verse the same recompense of those who conquered Jerusalem. And those who recite Surah 5, the table spread, Al-Ma'idah, and Surah 30, Arum, the Romans, will be compensated for each verse as those who visit Jerusalem. Now that is pretty powerful. In terms of looking at spiritual specialness, just you want to get blessings, just read this. And it's like visiting Jerusalem.
So you say that this, if years and years go by of your life as a believer and you recite these, then for those that aren't capable for health reasons or financial reasons to visit Mecca are not pardoned, but it's a proxy, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what you're not able to do Islamically, you're not held responsible for.
Even if you wait so long to go, so let's say in your 20s or 30s, whether you're born and raised in the faith, you had opportunities to go, but then as years go on, then you don't. Is that view,
Well, number one, it's not a commandment, a hukam. It's not a hukam to go to Jerusalem. But here it's saying, if you do these things, you'll get compensated as if you did visit this place. The only place that we are absolutely have to go if we can afford it is Mecca. So if you have money and you don't do it, I think you will be questioned on that day, without a doubt. And there's plenty of evidence for that.
Oh, so this doesn't replace Mecca. It's just
Oh, no. This is simply, I'm doing a lecture on Jerusalem in the Qur'an and in Islam. And I'm doing it in a religion class, and so I wanted to share this with the students here. Just trying to come from a scholarly standpoint on what's out there about Jerusalem.
Okay.
Any comments, anything that anybody wants to share? How many people have been to Jerusalem here? Because these are the people we need to be hearing from. So we're free to talk. I'm going to turn this off for now.